welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we are going to dive into the world of BlackRock.
Oh, yeah.
So BlackRock is this company that manages
trillions
of dollars.
Ah.
And it seems like they attract a lot of attention on YouTube for all sorts of conspiracy theories.
Wild ones.
Wild ones.
Yeah.
So you guys have sent in a bunch of these videos claiming everything from BlackRock having hidden control over the economy.
Oh, wow.
To even connections with covert operations.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're talking like CIA stuff here.
That's right.
So we're going to try and sift through these claims and see what we can learn about BlackRock and their impact on the financial system.
It's fascinating how much attention they get. Their
Good.
sheer size and influence naturally spark curiosity.
Right.
And sometimes that leads down some pretty interesting paths.
For sure.
But I think it's important to start with a clear picture of what they actually do and how they've achieved this level of influence.
Yes, because, I mean, when you hear BlackRock manages trillions, it's hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
It's not like they're just a big bank.
No, they're not a bank.
Right.
They're an asset manager.
Oh.
Think of them as a giant middleman between investors and the companies they invest in.
Gotcha.
They take money from clients, pension funds, insurance companies, even universities.
Oh, wow.
And invest it across a wide range of assets, hoping to generate returns.
Interesting. So one of the videos that we got actually mentioned that they manage something like $10.6 trillion.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
A lot of money. More than half of the entire U.S. GDP.
Wow. So does that scale automatically equal, like, controlling everything, like some of these videos suggest?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? To understand their influence, we need to look at how they invest that money.
Okay.
And their primary strategy is built around index funds and passive investing. The idea behind an index fund is to mirror a specific market index, like the S&P 500.
Right.
By investing in a basket of stocks that represent that index.
Okay.
So it's like diversifying your bets across the entire casino rather than putting all your chips on one number.
Gotcha. Less risk.
Less risk.
More consistent returns.
Ex
Makes sense why it's become popular. But how does the passive investing play into this?
Right.
Doesn't that imply they're just kind of sitting back and watching the market go up and down?
Yes and no.
Okay.
While they're not actively trading stocks every day, trying to time the market, it's not entirely hands-off.
Well,
They still make decisions about which indexes to track, how to allocate assets, and they engage in shareholder voting.
Oh, that's right.
And when you own a significant chunk of almost every major company, that voting power becomes pretty substantial.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Which brings us to this idea of the big three that keeps popping up in these videos. So we have BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street.
That's right.
And they all use this passive investing strategy, and they collectively own a huge portion of the market.
Huge portion. What are the implications of that kind of concentrated ownership?
It's complicated. Some argue that it leads to what's called universal ownership, where these few entities have such a large stake in almost all corporations that it can potentially stifle competition.
That makes sense.
If the same investors own large chunks of competing companies, is there really an incentive to lower prices or out-innovate each other?
Yeah, that's a good point. The example that really stuck with me from one of the videos was that the big three actually own a larger portion of Amazon than Jeff Bezos himself.
That's right.
It's crazy.
It's wild.
It definitely makes you wonder about whose interests are being prioritized.
Yeah.
Because it's not like they're investing their own money.
Right.
This is coming from pension plans, retirement accounts, everyday people.
Yeah.
Do those people even have a say in how their money is being voted?
Yeah. That's a key point.
Yeah.
While the money ultimately comes from a vast pool of individual investors, those individuals don't have direct voting rights. Right. And a 2017 study actually found that asset managers, including BlackRock, tend to vote in alignment with company executives, potentially prioritizing shareholder profits over other concerns like worker wages or long-term sustainability.
So it's not necessarily some evil conspiracy then, but more of a systemic issue where the incentives might not be aligned with broader societal goals.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's so important to have these discussions and delve into these potential consequences of this level of concentrated ownership.
Now let's talk about this revolving door between BlackRock and the government that keeps getting mentioned.
Yeah.
It sounds shady. Are former government officials actually using their connections to give BlackRock an unfair advantage?
Well, the connections are definitely there.
Okay.
One video cited that BlackRock has hired at least 84 former government officials,
Wow.
regulators, and central bankers since 2004.
That's a lot of people. What kind of positions are these people taking at BlackRock?
It varies, but many of them end up in senior roles where they can leverage their experience and relationships with former colleagues.
So does that automatically translate to undue influence, or is it more nuanced than that?
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge the potential for conflicts of interest
Yeah.
when former regulators and policymakers are working for companies they used to oversee.
For sure.
But at the same time, there's also value in having people with deep understanding of government and financial systems working in the private sector.
Okay.
The key is transparency.
Right.
We need to know who these people are, what their roles are, and whether there are safeguards in place to prevent conflicts of interest.
So maybe not a clear-cut case of corruption, but definitely something worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And speaking of potential conflicts, these videos also bring up BlackRock's lobbying efforts.
Yeah.
And how they've managed to avoid stricter regulations despite their size and influence. One even claims they have this loophole that allows them to self-certify their compliance with passive investment rules.
Interesting.
What's the deal with that?
Well, it is true that BlackRock and other asset managers aren't subject to the same level of scrutiny as traditional banks.
That's interesting.
After the 2008 financial crisis, the Financial Stability Oversight Council did flag BlackRock as a potential risk to the system.
Oh, wow.
Suggesting their failure could trigger another collapse.
Really?
But they ultimately decided not to designate them as systemically important financial institutions, which would have subjected them to stricter oversight.
That's interesting because they're not a bank, but they control a lot of money.
A lot.
So how do they get away with this self-certification thing?
Well, the argument is that because they're primarily engaged in passive investing, they don't pose the same kinds of risks as actively managed funds or institutions that engage in more complex financial transactions.
Okay.
But critics argue that this self-certification process lacks transparency and allows BlackRock to operate with a level of freedom that could potentially be detrimental to the financial system as a whole.
So it sounds like there's a growing recognition that even though they're not a traditional financial institution,
Right.
their size and influence demand a closer look.
Yeah.
And perhaps some of these conspiracy theories aren't as far-fetched as they might seem at first glance.
That's a valid point. And it's worth noting that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the FDIC are currently pushing for increased regulation of asset managers like BlackRock.
Okay.
Arguing they pose systemic risks similar to banks.
It seems like the more we dig, the more complicated it gets.
It does.
And to add another layer of complexity, there's this whole circular relationship within the big three.
Oh, yeah.
Where they're all major investors in each other's funds.
Right.
So it's not just BlackRock, but this interconnected triangle at the heart of the financial system.
Yeah, it's like a financial Ouroboros.
That's a pretty powerful position to be in.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. And understanding this complex web of relationships is crucial if we want to make sense of the modern economy and how it impacts our lives.
Okay, so we've established that BlackRock's size and influence are definitely things worth paying attention to. But let's be honest, some of these YouTube videos take it to a whole other level. We're talking CIA, mind control BlackRock, orchestrating international incidents. It's wild.
It's certainly tempting to get caught up in those narratives. They tap into the sense of mystery and intrigue. But as we discussed earlier, it's crucial to separate fact from fiction and approach these claims with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One video we received claimed BlackRock was somehow connected to the CIA's MKUltra program. You know, the infamous mind control experiments from back in the 60s and 70s. I mean, come on. Where do they even get this stuff?
Well, the video focuses heavily on the disturbing details of MKUltra, which was a real and highly controversial program. The CIA did use various techniques like hypnosis, drugs, and psychological torture in an attempt to control people's minds.
That's some seriously dark stuff. But how do they connect that to BlackRock?
They don't really. They seem to rely on the fact that most people don't know much about BlackRock's history. They assume because the company is powerful now, it must have been involved in all sorts of shady dealings in the past.
So it's guilt by association? Like, because they're big and influential now, they must have been involved in every conspiracy theory going back decades?
Exactly. It's a classic tactic used to create a sense of suspicion and distrust. And to be fair, BlackRock's lack of transparency about its own history doesn't really help matters.
Okay, so no mind control. What about this claim that BlackRock secretly controls global events? One video I watched alleges they orchestrated the escape of American diplomats from Iran during the 1979 hostage crisis. They even bring up the movie Argo.
Ah, yes, the Argo conspiracy. It's a popular one because it blends real history with speculation. The CIA did orchestrate a daring escape plan using a fake Hollywood film production as cover to get 6 American diplomats out of Iran. But there's absolutely no evidence to suggest BlackRock played any role.
Right, because Argo was set in 1979, and BlackRock wasn't founded until 1988. Chronology matters. But this same video goes on to claim BlackRock was involved in a botched CIA assassination attempt in Beirut in 1985. Something about a car bomb targeting a Lebanese cleric. It feels like they're just throwing darts at a board and seeing what sticks.
It's a bit like that, isn't it? This claim also stems from a real historical event. The CIA, under the direction of William Casey, did authorize a car bombing targeting Sheikh Mohammed Hussein Fadlallah, who they believed was responsible for several terrorist attacks against Americans. However, the operation went horribly wrong, killing 83 innocent civilians and failing to eliminate Fadlallah.
A truly tragic event, and a stark reminder of the unintended consequences of covert operations.
Indeed. But once again, there's no evidence to link BlackRock to this event. The video seems to conflate BlackRock's current size and influence with historical events that occurred long before the company even existed.
It's like they're trying to create this grand narrative where BlackRock is the puppet master behind every major event of the past few decades. It's just not credible.
Right. They're cherry-picking facts, ignoring chronology and context to fit their predetermined narrative. It's crucial to be aware of these tactics when consuming information online, especially when it comes to conspiracy theories.
So we can debunk the mind control and covert ops theories. But what about these claims that BlackRock is profiting off the misery of everyday people and pushing agendas that benefit the wealthy elite? There's definitely a lot of anxiety out there about economic inequality and who's really pulling the levers of power.
Absolutely. And those anxieties are understandable given the growing wealth gap and the sense that the system is rigged against the average person. Some of the videos we received focus on BlackRock's alleged role in wage stagnation, arguing that their pursuit of shareholder profits leads to companies squeezing workers and suppressing wages.
It's a common criticism of the whole shareholder capitalism model, isn't it? That companies prioritize short-term profits for investors over the long-term well-being of their employees.
Right. And then there's the argument that BlackRock's massive stake in so many companies, including competitors within the same industry, could actually stifle competition and drive up prices for consumers.
Which goes back to that concept of universal ownership we were discussing earlier. If the same entities own significant shares in competing businesses, do they really have an incentive to compete on price or innovate? It's like those old school monopolies controlling entire industries.
Yeah.
Are we headed back to that?
It's a complex issue with no easy answers. Some economists argue that universal ownership, while potentially impacting competition, can also encourage companies to focus on long-term value creation rather than short-term gains. They point to the fact that these large asset managers are incentivized to see the companies they invest in succeed over the long haul.
So it's not necessarily a black and white situation.
Exactly. There's a lot of nuance here. The impacts of universal ownership are still being debated, and more research is needed to fully understand its implications for the economy and society as a whole.
But it's definitely a trend worth paying attention to, especially as BlackRock and the other big three continue to grow their assets and influence.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that this is your money they're managing. Retirement funds, pension plans, investments, it all flows through these massive asset managers. So understanding how they operate and what their priorities are is crucial.
And maybe even demanding more transparency and accountability in the financial system.
Precisely. This deep dive isn't about validating conspiracy theories, but about encouraging informed skepticism and asking the right questions. We need to look beyond the sensational headlines and dig into the complexities of these issues.
Okay, so we've tackled mind control covert operations and the economic anxieties fueling these BlackRock conspiracies. But these YouTube videos also touch on some pretty interesting questions about the future of finance and the role of technology in all of this. Let's explore that a bit.
Sure. Let's dive in.
So one of the big themes of these videos is this idea of a cashless society.
Yeah.
Where physical money becomes obsolete.
Right.
And everything is digital. Some people think that this is like BlackRock's ultimate goal.
Oh, wow.
To control all the money in a completely digital world.
Interesting.
It sounds pretty sci-fi to me, but I have to admit I hardly ever use cash anymore.
Yeah, it's true. We're already seeing a shift towards digital payments,
Yeah,
with apps like Apple Pay and Venmo becoming so popular.
for sure. And those tap-to-pay credit cards are everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
It's definitely convenient.
Mm-hmm.
But these videos paint a pretty dystopian picture of a cashless society.
Right.
Where governments and corporations have total control over our finances.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about tracking every transaction, freezing accounts,
Mm-hmm.
even manipulating our spending habits through algorithms.
Right.
It's a bit unsettling to think about.
I think it's important to acknowledge those concerns.
Yeah.
A cashless society does raise legitimate questions about privacy,
Yeah, for sure.
security and control. Who has access to our financial data?
Right.
What safeguards are in place to prevent abuse? These are things we need to be thinking about carefully as technology advances.
Yeah, because it's not just about convenience.
Right.
It's about power.
Exactly.
And who holds it.
And some of these videos speculate that BlackRock, with its vast financial resources and technological capabilities, could play a significant role in shaping this cashless future. They even suggest BlackRock might develop its own digital currency.
Whoa, their own BlackRock coin.
Yeah.
That seems like a huge leap.
Yeah.
Do you think they'd actually try to go that route?
Well, we've already seen the rise of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum.
True.
So the idea of a company like BlackRock creating its own digital currency isn't entirely out there.
Yeah.
It would certainly be a bold move and would likely face a lot of regulatory hurdles.
Yeah, because wouldn't that require government approval?
Right.
And we've been talking about how BlackRock supposedly avoids a lot of regulations. It seems contradictory.
It does raise a lot of questions about how a BlackRock-backed digital currency would fit into existing financial regulations. The regulatory landscape surrounding cryptocurrencies is still evolving.
Yeah.
And it would likely require a major shift in policy to accommodate something like this.
I guess it all comes back to how much control we're willing to cede to these powerful financial institutions, whether it's in a cashless society or in the traditional system.
Right. And it's up to us as informed citizens to engage in these discussions, ask the tough questions, and demand transparency and accountability from those who hold so much influence over our financial lives.
Well said.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of BlackRock and these conspiracy theories, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is the importance of critical thinking, especially when it comes to information online.
Yeah.
We need to be wary of sensationalized narratives and look beyond the headlines to understand the complexities of these issues.
Yeah.
BlackRock is a powerful player in the financial system, and while they may not be pulling strings from the shadows, like some of these videos suggest, their influence is undeniable.
And it seems like that influence is only going to grow as technology advances and the financial landscape continues to evolve.
Absolutely. And it's up to us to stay informed, ask the right questions, and hold these powerful institutions accountable.
Couldn't have said better myself. Well, I think we've reached the bottom of this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. And remember, don't believe everything you see on YouTube. Keep those sources coming, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.